Hello, you're listening to the Studio Shangri-La podcast, episode 3, and I'm your host and owner of the studio, Sarah Eichert. Please keep in mind that if you'd like to be part of the podcast, you can contact through the website studio-shangri-la.com. Alright, today's topic is Biosynergy for a better world. And this involves the overarching subjects and large ones of chemistry and philosophy. So let's have an introduction here. Materials science in the world is a very large field, and that connects the development of metals, polymers, ceramics, so many different types of materials that are used in everyday life and the architecture of life. Materials are so important because they're connected to our ecology. The Earth contains a lot of resources. It can be viewed that way, that the Earth is a giant globe of resources. However, it's also a living being and a living entity. And although a lot of these materials can be harvested and are in great abundance oftentimes, of course, a lot of responsibility has to be considered when you are digging up certain environments, and what exactly is it that you're unearthing? And can it be replaced? There's an important consideration in society. It's very important. And that is using materials that are known to be toxic and have toxic side effects. Yeah, it definitely deserves that sound effect. That are known to be toxic, prevalent in everyday construction and everyday products. An example of unearthing toxic materials, that's right, is using radioactive materials. Now, while it might not seem to be a problem when the radiation is in small amounts, when you get a lot of these materials being used in an aggregate, the combined effect can be detrimental to public health. Yeah, there's a lot of shelf life concerns for how these materials being used in society in so many different products and processes, just what an effect that has on overall public health. There have to be much stricter and, well, maybe that's not quite the word. There have to be much more enlightened, aware, and fully developed standards for manufacturing. Now, this doesn't have to be to the detriment of companies. It means quite simply that companies and manufacturing have to modernize and innovate. Yes, innovation deserves a round of applause because innovation also drives the economy. And so there's a lot of benefit to be derived from biosynergetic innovation and the revamping of manufacturing standards. An example of regulation already in place is California Prop 65, which is quite an extensive list. But it's very important to be more enlightened about the effects of all these materials and their derivatives, especially synthetic polymers. Now, take plastic in its many forms. When it was invented, of course, it was seen as brilliant. A material that would not degrade over time. Of course, in the big picture, this turned out to be kind of an unfortunate side effect. Hindsight, right? So, the way forward is not ditching this advanced chemistry that would give us so many advanced polymers. It's not about getting rid of all that. It's quite simply considering the shelf life and biodegradability, compostability of all these materials. Taking things back to nature. Because nature, after all, is the original technology. All the technology that we have and the technology of the human body even comes from nature. I keep using that sound effect because I find that quite magical. Even in studying human biology and plant biology, we can learn from these really very advanced, but also very intelligent and efficient processes. What we're seeing now, of course, is the solution, the development of compostable materials, biodegradable materials, of non-toxic substances from which we can build our infrastructure. And those abilities and technologies are all there. They're already there. All we have to do is keep implementing them. And, excuse me, first time I've been talking for a long run on the podcast. Anyway, so what we can do in implementing these new, yet really going back to nature methods is keep tweaking and modifying over time. Of course, the more and the sooner, the better. Biosynergy, meaning non-destructive to the environment, of which we are most definitely a part and need to survive. And also harnessing nature, because nature keeps the planet in balance, and nature, in fact, nurtures us. An example of this is urban reforestation for air quality and public health, and also general beautification and quality of life. Now, when it comes down to the products that we interact with in our homes and work environments, and if we live in cities, urban environments, I mean, this is really, really important. If materials and construction are truly enlightened and aware, these things can be used to enhance public health rather than having warning labels about toxicity and hazard, or the Prop 65 labels of potential reproductive harm. Now, do companies need to be regulated on this? My feeling is that it's a no-brainer. If you're working with a material that has the potential to be hazardous to public health, that's a no-go. So, while the amount of exposure to certain chemicals might be within acceptable standards for one product, well, what happens when you take a whole bunch of products and put them all together? You know, it doesn't really take into account the aggregate effect. So there's a lot of room for improvement in chemistry and materials manufacturing. The quality is so important to our present and our future on this planet, because toxic chemicals affect us. Yeah, they do. In the aggregate effect. So imagine, humans have evolved to be very strong and resilient. Imagine how much better we could do if we weren't having to deal with so many free radicals, so to speak. And just imagine what such an improvement in conscientious materials and construction, what that would do. And also, I should mention the philosophical approach of non-destructiveness and not continuing to essentially tear up the environment. A very simple example of an efficient, non-destructive technology is adding in solar infrastructure. Yeah, the sun, right? It's the best nuclear reactor out there, at least that we have. So that's a perfect example of something that's relatively easy to implement. Of course, once you have a lot of systems in place, is change difficult? Yes. But of course, you just have to put one foot in front of the other and look at the bigger picture. At the root of things is science and its implementation. Instead of working against nature, it's important to work with nature. This is the planet and this is the home that we've got. And it's a beautiful and great one. Of course, there are more people now than ever. And although the expansion to other planets is imminent and necessary, it's also even more necessary to take care of what we've got and improve systems. Any company would want to do this, to implement and drive innovation for benefit and overall improvement, for evolution. The value of nature is our very life. We come from nature. And arguably, we're supposed to take care of it. And that's part of why we're here. To nurture our environment as it definitely does us. And that's exactly what science tells us. That this environment is perfectly rigged for our survival. Well, now that we've learned more about it and how it works, thus comes the responsibility of improving processes and how we live here. There are so many great examples of advances in manufacturing. And so that's a great thing, very encouraging. I could list a few companies, but there's actually too many to list that are now taking the initiative of considering life cycle and effects when making products and having compostable or biodegradable materials is going to make a huge difference, for example. Because who likes to see a lot of trash laying around? And it's really not good for our health either to have these pieces of trash that will last for an eternity. Okay, and it's not really necessary either. So materials, even in more advanced sectors like nanotechnology. Of course, the life cycles can be considered there too. And the responsibility of being eco-friendly and sustainable can carry over there as well. Because where do all these metals and minerals come from? The earth. All the technology we have is based on nature and ourselves. So the mining of said materials, that's another matter, of course. And there's a new field of synthetic materials. I think we'll have a more enlightened approach rather than continuing to carve up the earth. So it's all happening. And the important message, the important overall message of this episode 3 podcast is that philosophy in the sciences, in chemistry, it matters. It matters the way that we do things, and it matters the broader picture and the meanings behind the processes. And biosynergy is crucial. All of the knowledge and methods for innovation are there. And as I said before, already being implemented. Becoming more widespread, of course, is essential. But there's every reason to be optimistic, and companies can take the initiative. Individuals can take the initiative, one step at a time, one methodical change at a time. If it's the individual, one lifestyle tweak at a time. It makes a difference, and the aggregate does add up positively there. So we don't necessarily have to be fixated on doomsday or dystopian scenarios, because it most definitely doesn't have to be that way. There are a lot of brilliant minds out there, more so than ever. And let's keep focused on the positive power of technology that does, in fact, originate from nature. Thanks for listening to this episode 3 of Studio Shangri-La podcast. And once again, please get in touch through the website studioshangri-la.com if you'd like to be part of it.